Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1337 of our daily content grind. So today we are getting a Patreon request out of the way. Before we start that, I will say thank you to everyone who has a Patreon request in and you're being very patient with it. This has been the busiest 6 months of my life, setting up Magnetar and then redoing my entire computer setup after the original one popped on me, and then setting up a studio room. I have never had a moment of rest in the last 6 months, it feels like. So, to everyone who has been patient, waiting for your request to come up, I do appreciate it. I promise you, even if you're not part of the Patreon anymore, you're going to get it. I promise everyone it's all going to get done. So, we're going to start clearing out the backlog a little bit by going over this request, which is essentially to take Dawn of Futures Past, arguably the best Botcon set that was ever done, and continue it by creating an entirely new cast based on Beast Wars 2nd and Beast Wars Neo. Now, there's a lot of options here, so you'll excuse me if I just kind of bounce around both as I just come up with just about everything I thought of. We're not going to spend a lot of time on each one, just boom, 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 boom. So, if you don't know this Botcon set, the idea was that it was a prequel to Beast Wars. It was the cast from the cartoon, but all in Cybertronian modes before they took Beast modes on Earth. And that's how. And then to facilitate that, they took a lot of molds from Transformers Cybertron, where everything was more futuristic in design. So the request here said I could use any mold from any era, but I am going to stay true to that intention. I'm going to stick to strictly futuristic and Cybertronian vehicles. So that is my personal limitation. And a lot of these toys that were done for that set were either based on this sculpt kind of looks like this character, or this mold or this vehicle really suits the personality or the silhouette of the character. So for instance, if I were to say take Beast Wars Quick Strike, for instance, and I take a look at that beast mode with the long front claws and the tail, and I think what mold works for that, and my brain will go to Studio Series D16 Megatron. It even has twin guns on both arms, so it actually works in that as well. But yeah, you can see where I'm going with this, right? So your turret becomes the tail, your front treads become the pincers. Even helps that Quick Strike's pincers in the front will actually become his legs in robot mode, just like these treads on Megatron will. So that's where the idea of like reworking this comes from. And that's kind of what I'm going to go with. I'm going to try and match things as best as possible. And if I can't get a full match, I'll at least get the silhouette across so that when you see that design with those colors apply, you'll go, it's that character. Like, that's what I'm going for with this. Also, I am going to stick to as close to Botcon rules as possible. I'm allowing myself remolded heads and only remolded, and only like one other remold, and it's something simple, a chest or a head, and that's it. We're not going to go through full body retools like Hasbro does. So, if we continue on that thread of logic, here's Bighorn. Now, this one was actually pretty easy, and the mold is actually pretty recent. It's the brand new Studio Series Gamer Edition Ironhide from War for Cybertron. It has the mass, it has the bulk, it has the round but still strong shape in the vehicle mode. It even has the big backpack of kibble sticking backward off of the toy. So I think this works in a multitude of levels. You even right down to like the fact that his chest is supposed to be the front of his vehicle mode. So, like, I think this, honestly, I feel like I have some very clever picks amongst this list, but I don't think any of them are better suited than these two. I think this is like peak for like, this is the spirit of the original idea. But if we really want to go into clever, like I said, part of this is sometimes you just have to match the silhouette, right? So how do you do a new scuba? What mold can I possibly use for scuba? It's a squid. So Obviously, I can't find a tentacled figure unless it's a quintesson, and I'm not using a quintesson. But what if we went with something like, oh no, DevCon here? Because we're looking at that vehicle mode shape. And if you stop and take that way that is a spaceship and start viewing it as a submersible, a submarine, with water jets instead of thrusters, now you start seeing where this could feasibly be scuba. Brand new head, clever paint job on the chest, just like they were doing in Dawn of Futures Past. And then all four of those thrusters on him, including the two you can relocate, which would actually help a lot with this, that starts forming the basis for what would become his tentacles in beast mode. So that's where the logic starts coming from, and I think the shape fits a squid pretty well. Here's the weird one. I love this one. So how do we get Heinrad in here? What could I possibly do to get the Tanuki with a clock in his chest into this toy line, this presumed future Dawn of Futures Past? I don't know why, but I like this. I like using this mold for it. This, for some reason, works in my head. Body shape, kinda. Yeah, if we're going Cybertronian, I will, I would accept that. And I will admit I'm cheating. I don't want to make it an aerial vehicle mode unless it's an aerial beast mode or whatever it ended up being in Beast Wars 2nd or Neo. But this you can reimagine as, like a hover tank or something. So it's not necessarily like a jet. It's not necessarily a space fighter or anything. You can imagine this as something else. You know what you do with this, though? You remold the head, obviously. You might paint the gun, the shoulder cannon, white to be his, like, sake blaster thing. The chest on Soundwave, you don't retool. What you do is you tampograph a digital clock with the old school LCD numbers on it. And what you put on there is 2:03 p.m. because February 3rd is the debut date of Beast Wars Neo. Referential suits a character, works that shape perfectly. I thought that was clever. I like that idea. How about a weird one? Let's get Power Hug in here. I found out I could work a lot of these insects into this whole thing, but I wanted to keep it a little bit more limited. How do I work Power Hug in? Well, thankfully, we have a Bumblebee for that. This works way better than it should. This works way better than it should. Because you absolutely have that silhouette and shape in the vehicle mode. But what kills me on top of that is you do have that piece of the chest sticking out. That works for both characters. You also have the fact that there's round shell on the forearms of Bumblebee. There's actual shell in that same shape. That works. It shouldn't work, but it works. And it's hilarious to me that it works. That's one of the toys where if Botcon was doing it, they wouldn't even retool the head because this head already has horns. That's one of those where they would repaint it as close as they could and just go like, yeah, budgetary reasons, take it for what it is. But it would be amazing. I think it works. I think it's clever. Now, if you want hard mode, let's try hard mode here. Now, I can't do one if I don't do all three, right? Obviously, they won't combine, but we can at least get Tripledacus in here. So, motor arm. Oh, I love this one. I love this one. Bumblebee movie Brawn. He's shaped like a beetle. Like, that works so well. That works so well for me. Man, I almost made him drill nuts because drill tank, right? But I didn't want the comment section to be full of people mentioning drill nuts. So I decided that I would not be using drill nuts. So he's motor arm instead. This mold was getting used one way or another. And I thought, if I can come up with an idea for his teammates, sure, I'm going to throw him in as motor arm. Not drill nuts. Now the rest of the team. So, DJ, if you know my rants from the previous years, I am really offended anytime someone takes Waspinator and like turns him into a jet as his Earth mode or vehicle mode. No, no, bugs fly with rapid wing movement and they are capable of staying in one spot. They don't have to constantly move forward like a jet or a plane. Meaning, the only thing a bug should be turned into for a vehicle mode is a helicopter. And that means I have to use Spinister. And that still works for me. It's still Cybertronian, it's still futuristic, and the chest, there is a little bit of room there to actually create like a semblance of how his chest looks in robot mode as well. If you imagine those little like square gaps like on the front side of his chest, is like where the eyes would be painted on for like the cicada head. He's definitely thinner. He's definitely thinner than DJ, but smack a new head on him, and it works. You can even reposition his helicopter blades to hang down like DJ's wings do, just if you want that, like that little bit of extra. The trick here is Gimlet. I'm not going to find a mold with those super long arms, nothing that's Cybertronian anyway. So I got to work with what I got. And again, this is where I go to silhouette. I want you to be able to tell, I can get a new head and a new chest so that the robot strikes you as Gimlet. And the color scheme will help a lot with that too. But it's the beast mode that I'm worried about. I want it to actually feel like something that he would be on Cybertron, and then when he goes to Earth, this is what he turns into because this is what his design dictates he needs to be shaped like. In that sense, and because he needs to be a little bit bigger than his teammates, I have gone with Bumblebee Shockwave because you do get some semblance of that body shape in this design. Now, granted, we're going to have to take a few liberties here, but it was the only thing I could figure out to actually get all three out there. And I think, yeah, new chest, new head, you could make it work. It's a weird set, but you could make it work. Now, we want to include a few others. We don't just want to do Beasts here because Beast Wars 2 and Neo had vehicular characters as well. So if I start thinking about like Dirge and Thrust, those little like leftover Machine Wars toys that got repainted, if I think to those, my brain is looking for like Cybertronian Jet, but they were on the small side. I don't want to go larger than a deluxe. That takes out most of the jets that I have available to me. The truth is, the jet that I think is ideal for them doesn't technically exist yet. I could go to an Earthspark Deluxe, but I feel like that is a little primitive compared to the other molds I'm using, so I don't want to go there unless I absolutely have to. The mold that's perfect doesn't actually exist yet because I would use the 1-star Scream. Because that is slated to be a deluxe like all the other figures for this site, like for most of the other figures, Sentinel notwithstanding. But if they make it accurate to how he looked in the movie, I think it'd be a spot-on fit for those two. But in talking of these two and trying to figure out ideas for them, I figured out something so clever for Thrust, but I absolutely know in my heart of hearts it wouldn't work. And that's very upsetting to me. So I originally thought, what if I made him out of Snapdragon? Hear me out. Because yes, he has a jet mode, but he also has a dinosaur mode, which is how you throw the Thrustor homage, because Thrust becomes the Raptor remold, Cyber Raptor Thrustor. And that tickled my brain in such a fun way that it would actually be possible to get both of those in here. You could even work in the the cybernetic aspect of it, because there's a lot of parts of that T-Rex mode that don't show in the jet mode. The jet could just focus on being like this brownish yellow, like a halfway between the color of those two designs. But ultimately, it's too big. It doesn't have the Seeker look that I would need to hit. You know, the shoulders are too tall. That doesn't work. The silhouette's not there. I thought it was a funny idea, but I will fully admit it don't work. It don't work. That's a lot of the problem to some of these. Like, ideas that came close, but there's something a little bit off. My boy Karada. What do I do to get my boy Karada in a modern Dawn of Futures Past line? I'm not worried about the whip arm, technically, because, you know, that just comes with him choosing a snake alt mode. But, like, how do I get the personality across? How do I get, like, him in there? You know, what vehicle equates to a snake? Like, the closest I could come up to was, like, a motorcycle, because it's a very thin and longish for its mass vehicle. And in that, like, Iguanus came to mind. And I liked that at first because, you know, there is reptilian sculpting to the toy design. You know, so there's some kind of fun to be had in there. But ultimately, it's a core class. It's too small. I understand Dawn of Futures Past played very loose with scaling. You know, Optimus is not the largest Maximal on the team, but he was in that set. You know, Waspinator was way too small. He should not be the size of Rat Trap. Things like that, but that's just because of the molds they were using. They were playing fast and loose with it, whatever. But I would at least like to try to keep to some semblance. The best I got was actually, the new Legacy animated Prowl. Going by the fact that, yeah, it's a more futuristic motorcycle, though I will admit this is as close to real world as possible, but I think it gets in there the same way Rhinox as, you know, a big steam shovel gets in there. Or payloader. I'm going to go with payloader. It gets in there based on that, you know. But you know, like, I wish there was a smoother fit, but there's not. But I really want Kurata in there. You know, because I acknowledge that part of the fault that I'm having with coming up with ideas for this set is a lot of the most standout popular characters from these two series are standout and popular because they're so unique. You know, like Mach Kick and Break. The little penguin guy. What vehicle mode would a penguin be? Like, I sat here and tried to figure that one out and came up with nothing. Other ones like Long Rack. Long Rack is not in this video because, you know, I don't have a Cybertronian crane that I would need for something like that. You know, so a lot of this escaped me of, like, how do I convey these characters properly in a new toy, and some of them are kind of rough fits, but they work in, you know, like a Dawn of Futures Past way, you know, kind of like, I wanted Stampy in there, but what do you do with Stampy? I wanted him to be a fast vehicle. He means, like, and again, the problem is a lot of these characters are on the small side, but even if I have had access to all these past molds, there's not a lot of Cybertronian vehicles in the smaller scale. Even if I go back to Titan's Return or Generations, I have very, very few options to pick from. So some of these got to be upscaled to deluxe, whether I like it or not. I kind of wanted to make him out of the Sideswipe mold, which is another one where I feel like, yeah, they would just repaint that head and call it Stampy. I don't think they would do a retool on the head for that one. Honestly, I'm mostly getting away on this one because those fins on the back kibble give me bunny ear vibes. That's literally the only logic I have for this one, unfortunately. Tasmania Kid was another one I had trouble getting in because, honestly, there really isn't that great of a fit for the mold. What I ultimately decided on was going to be the War for Cybertron Ratchet mold, because he does have the taller shoulders. He does have that front cockpit shape in the vehicle mode that gives me the vibes of the large head beast mode that Tasmania Kid has. So little things like that. It's not the best of fits, but it's in there. You know, I at least want the characters in there somehow. And then we get to things like Randy. Poor Randy, right? So the only thing I can come up with here is the War for Cybertron Barricade, because I'm trying to use the front end of that toy. I'm trying to use the bumper of that toy to invoke the tusks of Randy. And more or less, this is me just wanting Randy to have a toy that doesn't crumple the second you look at it too hard, but also kind of continuing the vibe of like his toys never turn out good because no one likes this mold. I am okay with this mold at best. I'm not as vitriol as a lot of people tend to be about it. But at the very least, there's, the idea is there, and I want the character in there somehow. I'll tell you the ones that were really hard to come up with anything for were the leaders. Lio Convoy has a really unique shape that vehicle transformers don't really capture. So what would I do for him? I didn't just want to repaint a random Optimus Prime and call it Lio Convoy. That doesn't work for me. And then the Predacons were even harder. Galvatron's already Cybertron. He's already Cybertronian. So I don't need to do him for this set. What do I do with Magnetar? I got nothing for Magnetar. There's no way that's happening. But I need to get a leader in here somewhere, right? Somewhere in here, I need to get some leader representation. So the only one that came to mind, the only one I could figure out something for was Big Convoy himself. And you know what? I feel like if any one leader was going to get in here, I feel like this is the one fans would want anyway. So this was a tough one. I almost went with the War for Cybertron, like the Gamer Edition Optimus Prime, because I love that mold. It's a big, powerful vehicle. It's big, heavy set robot mode. Has a Matrix in it. I don't think it works because this character should be towering over everybody. He should be huge. I looked at leader class figures going, there's not a lot of Cybertronian leader class figures that work for this either. There's not a lot of Cybertronian vehicles in leader class to begin with. So when I racked my brain, I have to go, and I thought maybe, I don't know, like what was like Siege Ultra Magnus, but then like how do I explain the little robot inside it? The requester did say molds from any generation are fair game, right? What if I went with the Ultra Magnus that circumvents that little problem? My favorite Ultra Magnus toy, Titan, the one from Titan's Return. Your Combiner Wars, rather. Sorry about that. Let's not boldly state the series when I get it wrong. Either way, I love this mold, and I think it works. Not only is it very heavily armed, that's absolutely Big Convoy, it has those very tall shoulder pauldrons. That works for Big Convoy. That's your tusks, right? That's where your tusks go. You can remold the head easily enough. You can remold the chest to be like, and and there's like space inside the chest, right? So like, obviously, like you have the problem with Minimus Ambus being in there, but the truth is, you don't need him for any element of the character, or the toy, or the engineering. You can literally just leave that out. So instead, I would probably just remold a block that could stay in there during transformation and just be the Matrix compartment for the character. Even if the Matrix isn't its own unique part and comes out, it still counts as remolding the chest. And that would be like the extent. Like that's like the biggest idea I could think of. And that would be like my highlight piece to whatever like set of characters I picked and chose from this. That would be my big draw toy. That is the best one I had. And that's probably where I need to end it, because this video's probably gone on much longer than I intended. Obviously, there's plenty of room to do more of this. I'd have to get really creative for some characters I left off, but I didn't even touch all of the dinosaurs from Beast Wars Neo. That's a completely different roster to go through. There's a few other aspects that we could pick and choose from. This isn't necessarily done, but I would have to get really, really clever to continue it and get some of those other characters in there. But let me know what you thought of these ideas. Tell me which one your favorite was. That's the one I'm super curious about. Which idea did you like the best? So that is your assignment. Leave it in the comments section below. And thank you for watching. And as always, drill nuts.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday / early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.